Hello. Welcome to a bonus episode. This is a bunch of cut conversations that we had with Justin on episode 114. They're all really interesting things. A lot of it has to do with mythology. The only problem is that it wasn't directly attached to the question, and we recorded like an hour and 45 minutes of content for a 1 hour episode. So a lot of that good stuff ended up in here. So enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you back here in the near future for our next episode.
It's funny you say that because as I was listening to you talk, Derek,
sorry.
Oh no. It's good because it was making me think about things that I think about a lot. You were defining like God, like uppercase, lowercase God,
in a very simplistic, reductive way.
Yes. I have conversations about mythology all the time. But like the word mythology, right? Because
right.
Like myths and legends, like myths are not. Every religion has mythology to it, right? People tend to think that word is reserved for like, Celts or Greeks or like people religions that don't exist anymore. But what those people tend to not remember is that like they also those kind of like ways of thinking tend to apply them to things that are unfamiliar to them too, like Hinduism, Buddhism, right? Like things that still very much exist.
Hinduism is a major religion still,
right? But like a lot of those ways of thinking don't have any problem referring to Hindu myths as mythology. But the moment you turn around and you say, "Oh, the Christianity's creation myth," and they're like, "But that's not a myth. That's I always feel like it's really important to say, like, when we refer to things as myths, we're not saying it's not true. What we're saying is that there is a story behind it. There's a parable or a story or a way of thinking that like follows a certain set of rules, for lack of a better term, that we put into that category."
Well, the term for all the things that follow Abrahamic religions, which are Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, I use the term a lot, Judeo-Christian mythology. Because that encompasses more than just biblical scripture, but it is mythology.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
No. But like that's what it is. And there's just like I always think of that stigma behind it because like, like how you are trying to define sort of like these differences. I'm always trying to do the same thing with like my language, right? Hey, like when I say mythology, I don't mean not real. You know what I mean? I might not believe it, but it's not. It doesn't mean it's not real. It's just like that's what mythology doesn't mean real or fake. You know what I mean?
I forget who I was talking to. This is loosely connected to what you're saying, but it's a thing. The way you define, like the word God, is something that people struggle with defining that, depending on what your personal beliefs are. And we might cut this. You're welcome to cut this, Jim. But I was talking to somebody about the Islamic Allah is the same as the Jewish Christian God.
Right.
It's the Abrahamic. It's Yahweh. It's the whatever.
Right.
And there are lots of people who still struggle with that idea, and they say that's not the God I worship or whatever. And I'm like, that's like, for example, Justin, if I were to tell you, Jim said, "Don't set yourself on fire," and then you were to say, "No, Jim said, don't set other people on fire." like we're talking about the same person.
Yeah.
We just disagree about what he said.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, I have had a lot of conversations like that too. It's funny because anybody who likes to like study or like read about religion,
hi.
Yeah, I know. Me too. would agree with you, right? Because it's like so much. I mean, you could say the same thing about various facets of like Hinduism and Buddhism too, because like Siddhartha Gautama he was Hindu, and so he takes a lot of that.
Oh, I see.
I was just saying, I was just thinking about this a couple days ago. I really need to study Hinduism because, like, I don't know a lot about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's wild that for being as prolific as it is, it's fairly localized to like India. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are numerous Hindu people all over the world, but I feel like that being so specifically like that sort of area makes it everyone think, oh, it's in India. It's not in other places. It's a major world religion. It's everywhere.
It's for sure not represented in the American zeitgeist.
Right.
Which is wild because it's one of the largest, and it very well might be the oldest religion in the world.
Ooh,
like at least like as far as active religions, I'm sure.
Yeah, it will it transcends a lot of written language.
Yeah,
which I think is interesting. And then it also is it's the backbone of that sort of area, right? So
mm-hmm.
it's mostly India, but it also kind of stems in some of those sort of you can find them in outside of India, but India is where they mostly are.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Buddhism stems from that, right? Siddhartha Gautama is, if my memory serves correct, a Hindu prince that leaves because he doesn't, all of a sudden he's like, oh, I don't know what the world looks like. And he goes and sees the world and he's like, oh, everything sucks.
Right.
Living is suffering, living is pain. And then finds enlightenment. So a lot of Buddhist philosophy derives from some Hindu philosophy and stuff like that.
Yeah. What's interesting about that spread, because Buddhism then spread east, or maybe I don't know, it might have originated in the east and then spread back with him. I think about, because I'm pretty familiar with the Journey to the West. It's something that we talk about a lot. The Handsome Monkey King and the Journey to the West is to bring the teachings of Buddha further west,
right?
Or to retrieve the teachings from the West, basically traveling from China to India. And it's interesting because this was written by a Buddhist monk, but incorporates a lot of older Chinese mythology. And it's very similar to incorporating pagan myth into the Christian church.
Yes, the China's trying to sort of absorb some of the Buddha. Well, it's so spatially, when religion travels like that, it's so interesting. Because I don't know if I've ever talked about it on here. But one of the things that I bring up to a lot of my students whenever they ask me about religion, because they all know that I studied it in college, is because my students don't get a lot of exposure to things that aren't Christianity.
Makes sense.
Being in America, so I like to tell them about the spatial way that religion moves around places, right? Religion travels as culture travels. And there is this amazing story about how voodoo, Haitian and New Orleans voodoo, has a spirit god that is a Celtic goddess. I always have to look her up. Mama Bridget, I think, is the...
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, so my understanding is what happens is the French go up to Ireland, and the pagan religions of the Celts are smashed by a lot of the Christians, right? And a lot of those are absorbed into Catholicism, and by a variety of different European countries, and so Briet, the Celtic goddess, who is in charge of some of the Fae, ends up being turned into Saint Bridget in Europe. And then the French...
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Then the French end up moving down to West Africa. As they're starting to do the slave trade in West Africa, voodoo originates in the Yoruban area of West Africa, the Yoruban people. So there's lots of people from the Yoruban area who are then enslaved by the French and taken to Haiti. Well, a lot of the Yoruban religions are animistic, and one of those animistic religions is voodoo. And as people are being carted from West Africa to Haiti, the French are saying, now you have to speak French. Now you have to be Catholic. Now you have to worship what we worship and all that stuff. So by day, all these enslaved people are good French Catholics. And by night, they practice voodoo. And over a score of generations, you get sort of this parallel merger of both religion and language, right? Where like that's where Haitian Creole comes from. That's why it's based in French. That's also why voodoo has all these gods and goddesses that are that have Catholic saints as sort of a parallel, right? And one of the
There's
Catholic
a few of them,
there's so many of them because over generations, what happens is these families say, "Oh, like you have Saint Peter. Saint Peter ushers you from the land of the living to the land of the dead, right? Saint Peter is the one that you see whenever you go to, and they're like, we have somebody that does that too. Papa Legba does that. He's the guy.
Papa Legba, that's the one I was trying to think of.
He meets you at the crossroads, right? He's a crossroad. He's like a traditional psychopomp. He meets you at the crossroads.
Yeah.
And so like they are considered sometimes the same person. A lot of these people who are practicing voodoo are like, it's just the same name for a different name for the same person, right?
Right.
So they do the same thing with this Celtic saint, they who ends up being like a Celtic goddess turned into a saint so that they can wipe out paganism in Ireland, makes all the way down to Haiti, where now she's a voodoo goddess or voodoo spirit, right? So like all these voodoo spirits are traditionally sort of like West African and in physical features, except for her. She's often depicted as being like really fair skinned, bright red hair, and she sticks out like a sore thumb. And it's just like, what, like why do you like? They didn't even see people that look like this because the French don't look like that. But it's because of this like sort of like travel, and then that makes its way to New Orleans, obviously. But I love that story because it's just like it's just very interesting to see like spatially religion travels as culture. I mean, and that's not a great story. It's got a lot of slavery in it, but but it is an interesting like way to map out the way that religion moves through generations and then becomes syncretic, right? Which is cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's not good that it happened, but it's interesting to study.
It's a fascinating. What would you say? Like,
right? It's
fascinating the trajectory that follows.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, I that made me think. I mean, not to take it back to voodoo. This could be just built the whole episode about voodoo, I guess. But that made me think of Baron Samedi, the guy. I'm pronouncing that terribly, but the bad guy from Prince and the Frog is based on. He has a skull painted on his face and a top hat.
Yeah.
Also, he's in Live and Let Die.
He is. He's in everything.
Yeah.
But he's often depicted smoking a cigar, and that's interesting to me because this is a what we would think of as like a traditional historical deity who is wearing like arguably very modern clothing. And so I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, because he's the one that's depicted as in like a top hat.
Top hat and like a tailcoat and usually has a cigar. And it's like, I guess cigars are pretty old, but like, I don't know. That seems like such a modern thing.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of the like media that I have seen Baron Samedi presented in, it is very much like a suit jacket and like 19th to 20th century clothing. And I think that is very interesting.
He's in charge of like death, but he's not a psychopomp.
Mm-hmm.
And he's married. He's actually married. That's right. He's the one that's married to Mom and Brigitte, right? The one that we talked about. Yeah, they're married.
That's cool.
This is all coming back to me.
He's like the most famous one, and people always get him confused with Papa Legba.
Right. Because Papa Legba is a psychopomp. He's the one that ushers you from the land of the living to the land of the dead.
It's just such an iconic look, you know, like when you think voodoo, you think, oh, this guy with the top hat and a skull face.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I know of Baron Samedi because of James Bond, and James Bond is a fairly prolific media franchise. So
It's called James Bond, you said? And
Right.
so I want to like absolutely stress that this is not canon to Norse mythology, but it is a common misconception and what I think is kind of an interesting adaptation of Norse mythology. If you include a lot of the stuff that was added by Christian missionaries, so the prophecy of Ragnarok, which is supposed to be the end of the world. There's also a story that the last surviving people after Ragnarok are two characters named Leif and Leifthresir. Don't know how to pronounce them. But so the Christian missionaries have taken that and said, Ragnarok already happened. And those Norse gods, they're not alive anymore. So that's all done.
Oh.
And that's not what the Scandinavian people believed, but I think it's an interesting idea to say, oh yeah, that's the origin of the world, and Ragnarok happened, and we're actually in the new era of humanity. So like humanity are the things that take over in the
That's a
modern
really
society.
interesting idea, actually.
I mean, yeah, it's leave it to the Catholics to figure out a way to tell those pagans. Oh, those pagans, you can't be pagan anymore.
It was very political. It wasn't. We want to tell you were wrong.
Right.
We want you to just be on our team.
Right.
So whatever we have to tell you,
which is actually, all things considered, kind of like the nicest way that they've done that.
The nicest way to conquer.
Yeah.
It's like, you were right, but it already happened and it's over, and now we've moved on.
Well, just wait for the Inquisition. We'll
yeah. Oh, yeah, because historically, they've just been kind of like, if you don't want to believe what we believe, we'll kill you. So, like,
nobody expects it.
Nobody expected it, and they had to be dominant first. That's the trick.
Yeah.
Right.
They had to become the dominant force.
Even like the term pagan is like kind of insulting, because it's just like, at that point in time, it was just kind of like, pagans are not Christian. Like, are you not Catholic?
The word pagan literally just means non-dominant religion.
Right. Which means that the Catholics absolutely thought of themselves as dominant even before.
Sure.
Yeah, like I mean, like they weren't necessarily wrong. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, for most of human history at this point, I feel like
it's
been dominant. But
I sometimes wonder what would have happened if they had gone the other direction and met the Hindus first, because there are a lot of texts in the Hindu sacred texts that give believers a reason, and like a religious reason, to go to battle and to go to war. And I sometimes wonder what would have happened if like they had met them, and instead of being like, meeting pagans, a small sects of pagans that like really just were outnumbered in all honesty.
Yeah.
And like we're out. The Christians had better technology to a certain extent because they were Europeans. If they'd have met another force with like a faith base that was enough to rival them, because like Hinduism is, I think, the second or third largest religion in the world. I can't remember. Because Islam is also gaining a lot of trajectory now. And they're getting pretty big. But like, what would happen if they'd have gone the other way and had to deal with someone who wasn't big fish in a small pond kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for that. I hope that you found it as interesting as I personally did. That's why I saved it, because I thought it was really cool. But as always, if you have any feedback you want to send us, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com. And if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, you can email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. Don't forget to give us a name to call you by so that we have some way to address you. But other than that, I hope to see you back here for our next full episode, which should be pretty soon. I don't know what day I'm releasing this, so it's every other Wednesday. You know how it is. We've been here for 114 plus episodes, so I'm just going to stop talking now. I'm going to hit stop now. Bye.